On episode 72, my co-host is Michael Goldstein from the Nakamoto Institute.
Feed your interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by joining Hall of Fame podcaster Gary Leland on the Crypto Cousins podcast. And remember, we are all cousins in the world of crypto. This week's price of Bitcoin.
$3,380. That's down $461.74, or 12.1% over the past 7 days.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Gary Leland here.
How's it going? Bitstein here, aka Michael Goldstein.
And Michael, thanks for coming on the show. We have you're the second guest of season 2 of the Crypto Cousins, and I was going to say my second co-host, but if you count Tony, since he was here for a whole season, we're going to have to say you're my third co-host, my second guest co-host. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing great, and it's an honor to be any co-host down the line.
Very good, very good. Well, let's get into this pretty quick. Tell the audience, anyone who might not be familiar with Michael, just a quick little bit about Michael and your crypto world.
Well, I was born on a cold winter morning back many years ago.
What month? What month was it if it was so damn cold?
Yeah, it was February.
Oh,
it probably
okay.
wasn't that cold. I'm from Texas, so all lies around here. But so my interest in crypto and my role in crypto really had its beginnings as far back as high school when I didn't know Bitcoin existed at all. But around the time that Bitcoin was getting started, I was becoming very interested in Austrian economics, spending all of my time reading Mises.org and all of the literature there. And this instilled in me a deep love and desire for a return to sound money. That is a money that's based on actual market demands rather than one that has been co-opted and controlled by a government. And I was very much like a gold bug and all of that. And getting into college, I was involved in some libertarian groups, and I eventually started one of my own focused on Austrian economics called the Mises Circle. And we would do weekly discussions on various Austrian economic, readings, whether it was Rothbard or Hayek or whatever else. And at some point during this process, I guess in 2011, so this is actually before the Mises Circle started, I heard about Bitcoin for the first time from Daniel Krowitz when the 2011 bubble was getting started. So I think it was probably around $1. And I remember downloading the Bitcoin. It was at the time Bitcoin QT. People would know it as Bitcoin Core now. I downloaded it, installed it. Nothing was happening. I had no clue what this was. I uninstalled it and mostly forgot about it, except for watching the rise and fall of Bitcoin. Bitcoin went all the way up to $30 and then crashed to under $1.
What price was it when you first started looking at it?
Well, when I first heard about it was probably about $1. I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I wasn't that interested. It didn't really it didn't mean anything to me at all. But then in 2012, there was a famous Gawker article about the Silk Road. And of course, that just hit all of the right libertarian buttons for me. And that sort of brought Bitcoin back to the forefront of my mind. And I thought the Silk Road was a really neat and innovative idea, even if it was perhaps kind of doomed because of its particular strategy of creating freedom in the world. But in any case, it was extremely interesting and exciting. But I still thought that Bitcoin was a fiat currency. I didn't have which I don't think was a good use of the word fiat, but that's where my mind was. But then when Cody Wilson of Defense Distributed came to talk to our libertarian group in late 2012, this is before there was 3D printed anything. It was still an idea. He had compared the sending of physical objects to the internet with sending gold through the internet in a way known as Bitcoin. And that, along with all of his, introductions to me of the world of the cypherpunks and crypto anarchists, once again hit all the right libertarian buttons. And within that moment, Bitcoin completely clicked for me. So this was, when I guess Bitcoin was about, $10, although I was a poor college kid, so I couldn't even capitalize on that. But that set in motion everything since, and the Mises Circle quickly became the Bitcoin Circle, and a lot of early Bitcoin economic analysis came out of that. We were devouring, the works of Peter Serta. He had a fantastic master's thesis on the economics of Bitcoin at the time, and Conrad Graf, I think, had actually learned about Bitcoin from us, but went, on his own tangent and just produced some incredible articles at the time, and that really influenced a bit of our thinking. And Daniel was writing some articles, based on, his original thought, as well as a lot of the discussions going on, and that was exciting. And then eventually, I met Tur de Meester for the first time sometime in 2013, probably around July or so. And we were joking about the idea that there's a Mises Institute for Austrian economics. There should be a Nakamoto Institute for crypto anarchy. And, like many good jokes, it, had a connection to reality. And, I went ahead and eventually started the Nakamoto Institute website, which I'm primarily known for. So that's nakamotoinstitute.org. And just started collecting the works of the cypherpunks and crypto anarchists and Austrian economists and the public writings of Satoshi, and sort of give the whole picture of how to make sense from a primarily social and economic angle, the meaning and purpose and value of Bitcoin. So I started that with Daniel Krawitz and Pierre Rochard. And I guess about a year ago now, Pierre and I also started the Noted Bitcoin podcast, which it seems to have been quite a success, and we've had a lot of fun doing that. And that's also probably one of the main ways that people know me in the Bitcoin space.
Well, and that's at noted.org, right?
Yes, NODED.
Yeah, and that's a great show. I listen to that every week. Just going through a little bit about what you said just now. One of the things you mentioned that was Cody Wilson. Did you work for Cody, or do you work for Cody?
I've been a friend of Defense Distributed for many years. Basically, like that was I had met Cody around that time, in late 2012, and we hit it off because he had an aesthetic sensibility that resonated with me, that I think I picked up on, that a lot of other people didn't pick up on as much, and we really forged a friendship over that. So I've been around the Defense Distributed project for a while, but yeah.
Well, I know that I believe Defense Distributed was the sponsor at the Nakamoto Institute dinner during BitBlock Boom. And then I thought someone told me that you were affiliated with them, so that's why I was just asking, because I just didn't know. Right.
And Cody has also served as the sort of, I forget what we called the title, but like Director of Media Relations for the Nakamoto Institute, which has not really had to be invoked much because we don't really get contacted that often by the press. But when you get contacted by the press, you have to be careful because they often do not have your best interests at mind. And having someone with very strong rhetorical skills is a very high value.
Yeah, because you'll say something meaning one way and then it comes out another way.
Right. They say whatever. They take your words and make them say whatever it is that they want it to say, which is usually to make you look bad because you're into some stupid magic internet money nonsense.
So they know what the article is going to be already. They just need to get you to say what they want.
Yeah, these people are generally crooks, and I'm known to not be a big fan of the media establishment.
Well, that's there's a lot of people who agree with you there. While we're on the topic of Cody, do you know anything about Cody's situation right now, or can you say anything about it?
I really don't know anything that's not public.
It's good. I just thought I'd ask you. Might have. I know nothing, except what originally happened, and but it's amazing the stuff you hear, not just on this topic, not on Cody's topic, but also we talked about Silk Road earlier, and I know Lynn lives in Austin there too. And when you talk about Ross with somebody sometimes, it's funny, anytime you talk to someone, or not anytime, but quite a few times when you talk to someone about a situation, all of a sudden they speak as though it's fact.
Yes.
The negativity. Yeah. For instance, on Ross's part, using that as an example, I was talking to someone within the last 2 months about that, just in a casual conversation, not, it wasn't a debate or anything. And he brought up the fact, well, I would feel sorry for him, except for the fact he tried to hire hitmen. And I'm
right.
Going, whoa, wait a second. Those charges were dropped. I mean, they're never proven. I mean, so how can you use that as your whole basis of your thoughts?
Were those actually brought to him as charges in the first place?
No,
it may have been the case in I think Maryland, but in general, that wasn't even a part of his case. There was it was basically a smear job by. I mean, I think the first big time, like a big mention of that I saw was in the New York Times piece where they're like, Ross was an Eagle Scout and a great guy and all that, but then he turned dark and became, evil, drug lord and hired hitmen and stuff. Yeah, and it was, I mean, it's hard to know what is going on behind the scenes, the New York Times and wherever else, but I have to imagine, based on its effect, I have to assume that perhaps it was calculated this way to remove a lot of Ross's support base, because I know many libertarians who had been very supportive of Ross, but then when they heard that, they thought, oh, well, that's not very libertarian. I can't support. That's actually really bad. And so it was extremely sad to see, a lot of his support go away at the time. And that's in the interests of entities that are trying to make him a lesson for us all.
Well, obviously, 2 life sentences for making a website. I mean,
especially considering what he did pales in comparison to what we're seeing with HSBC and all of these other banking entities. Like sometimes Bitcoin is always painted to be the money of the currency of money laundering and crime and terrorism and all of this. And no, it's quite clearly the US dollar is the currency of choice for these activities, and large trusted institutions are engaging in these behaviors. But one guy makes a website that happens to, as far as I can tell, and what at least some research around it showed, it actually decreased a lot of violence around the drug trade, which I think is a very important issue. I don't do drugs, and I don't particularly condone drugs at all. But I don't want violence in the world just because someone needs their fix.
That shouldn't cause them to die, because they're addicted. And you don't even drink, you just told me. So you definitely don't do drugs, I assume.
Right. It's not, I didn't support the Silk Road because I had any interest in, buying stuff off it. I can't say I didn't visit it often just to marvel in what had been created. It was fascinating to, get on there and see, 5-star reviews for, this brand of meth. All right. Hey, you do you.
I've never been to it, but that was just, and like I said, I brought that up because it was so amazing to me how, that was this guy's whole basis. So people pull out parts of stories, and I agree. I think sometimes those things are thrown in just to down the support on that.
Right. And you pointed out something very, very important, which is that people just take these things as fact. So this is part of the problem with the way the media operates is people like to pretend that there isn't a bias in the media in many ways. So like you'll hear people make that defense of, say, The Economist or BBC, or something. It's like, oh, well, they're less biased than the rest. It's like, well, The Economist is a mouthpiece for the neoliberal establishment, and the BBC is a mouthpiece for the British government, and et cetera, et cetera. All of these have bias, and that's not necessarily bad. I have bias in my Twitter account, and I revel in my bias, but the sort of lack of honesty around that makes people think of these institutions as authoritative sources, such that if the New York Times prints it, how could it possibly be wrong? How dare you question the New York Times? What do you know? They've been in business for so long, and they have such a track record. Never mind that the track record includes this kind of smear thing on Ross, but way more egregious than that, in my opinion, is stuff like, Walter Duranty, who won a Pulitzer Prize for writing columns in the New York Times about how the Soviet Union was actually doing great and there was no famine. They only many decades later sort of apologized for having published that. But at the time, they were, basically complicit and encouraging the acts of the Soviet Union, one of the most, brutal regimes of the 20th century, and by virtue of that, one of the most brutal regimes in history. So it's hard for me to take these people seriously.
Understandable. Hey, before we get anything else, let me do a real quick plug here for my new site that I'm sponsoring, Crypto Crybaby. I don't know if you've seen the site CryptoCrybaby.com that I made, but it's a brand new website for T-shirts, Bitcoin T-shirt, caps, hoodies, and other great gear. In other words, it's a great place for Christmas presents for Bitcoin maximalists. And something I think you will like when it gets on there, Michael, is I've had this guy I went to high school with him in North Carolina. He's a master woodworker, and he's making custom-made, one-of-a-kind Bitcoin wooden cutting boards for steak.
Perfect.
So I thought you would be interested in that.
Yeah, I definitely need to get my hands on one of those.
Yeah, they're shipping now, as a matter of fact, to me. But this is the perfect place for Bitcoin maximalists. So check that out, everybody, at CryptoCrybaby.com. Hey, something I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you saw this in the news, but I assume you did. I saw an article on CryptoVest about Satoshi Nakamoto breaks silence on peer-to-peer foundation. Have you seen that?
So I did hear about this, and I did look up on the peer-to-peer foundation website. It appeared to just be, if I was seeing the right thing and there wasn't something deleted in the meantime, it was simply a post of 4 letters, NOUR.
Right.
Which is extremely cryptic or something, or just random hitting of the keyboard. But yes, I've seen that. So for those who don't know, the P2P Foundation, their website is one of the very first places that Satoshi Nakamoto posted. In fact, I'd have to go look at the timestamps. It may have even been before he posted on the cryptography mailing list. And I actually highly recommend people read his original post on the P2P Foundation website, because it's actually one of the best sort of overviews of the purpose of Bitcoin, just a scathing indictment of the monetary system and the banking system and how it has hindered economic development. But so that was one of the first places. But since since he disappeared, people have been obsessed with finding out who he is, and there's been endless drama around the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto, and there have been a couple posts and emails from him since he disappeared, or rather from the name Satoshi Nakamoto. But all of this has to be put in context of various known hacks, and also just general skepticism of what we can and can't actually know about Satoshi Nakamoto. So his email was known to be hacked. So an email coming from, Satoshi N at vistomail.com or whatever, or the GMX one. He had a few different emails, but those can be assumed to just be someone who had access to his email account, not necessarily from him himself. And I don't know when it happened, but it's been reported that his P2P Foundation account was also compromised many years ago. But there's also interesting stuff like the fact that we have a PGP key that has been associated with Satoshi Nakamoto. However, he never signed anything, and thus there's no actual way to use, for instance, that particular PGP key to verify anything he said. So basically anything you see online, if it's come from Satoshi Nakamoto, has to be taken with a very large grain of salt. I think there's one post from past this that I do have on the Nakamoto Institute, and I'm always hesitant about the fact that I even have it on there, which is that when the whole Dorian Nakamoto event was happening back in 2014, he had posted on the Satoshi Nakamoto account on the P2P Foundation, I should say, posted just, "I am not Dorian Nakamoto," which once again, we have no clue if that's actually from the entity we think of as Satoshi Nakamoto or if it was just someone online. Although I am pretty certain that it's at least true that he is not Dorian Nakamoto.
Well, that's the word the word that was posted was, as you said, Noor, which in Arabic means light. It's just kind of weird that someone would get on there and just post a word. I mean, you think if
but even then, I'm sure there's many combinations of letters that would just happen to be, that's Swahili for this positive thing, and so even that I think would be a total coincidence rather than purposeful. It's really basically, when I see this, it just is a reminder of the epistemological problems of taking seriously anything we see posted under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto at this point.
Well, if Satoshi Nakamoto, let's say if tomorrow he said, "I really feel like I need to come out to word and just leave a real message," how would he do that? Or is there a way to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the generally agreed upon solution to that, the only one that would really sort of make a dent, would be if there is a message signed by, say, block 9. Let me be more specific. The signature for the recipient of the Coinbase in block 9. And if I remember my history correct, that's because that was also the key that sent some Bitcoins to Hal Finney, which we know to have been Satoshi Nakamoto. So if you were able to sign a message with that key, then we'd have a pretty good case for you being Satoshi Nakamoto. It'd be certainly very, very interesting, and it'd be more credible than any of the claims we've heard so far.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense a lot there. Trace was on last week's show, Trace Mayer, and we were talking about you. We were talking about you. He likes you too.
I appreciate, I don't know how much I give him credit. I need to give him more credit, actually, because so after I learned about Bitcoin and crypto anarchy, this was, I think the exact date was like October 30th, 2008 or so, which, 2012, which was close to the anniversary of Bitcoin itself. But after that, Trace Mayer's YouTube videos were one of the few other sources I could find that was explaining a lot of this crypto anarchy stuff. So he actually had a major influence on my early Bitcoin development, putting me on the right path, because today it's so easy to find all kinds of great information on Bitcoin. But at the time, it was near impossible to find quality information. I still have up on, I haven't touched the Mises Circle website in years, but there's an announcement for our first Bitcoin meeting, and it has, I had made a Bitcoin reader, for anyone who wanted to come to get acquainted with Bitcoin stuff, and it's laughably short, and there's really not much to look at. So we've come a long way, but I have to really thank Trace for having had that information out there at the right time so that I could learn from him and help get put on the right path.
Well, one of the things Trace mentioned about you is, I don't know if he said about you necessarily, but when we were talking about it, the topic came up was hyper-Bitcoinization. And so he was talking about that, and I am not that knowledgeable on that subject. So I made a note to ask you to explain that to me.
So first, the history. So that term did come out of, I don't remember if the article was first posted on the Mises Circle or the Nakamoto Institute. We had migrated all of the Bitcoin articles to the Nakamoto Institute at some time. But in any case, that was an article written by Daniel back in, actually I want to look it up specifically so I get it right. Basically, it was positing what would the process of hyper monetization of Bitcoin look like. So this was March 29th, 2014. So this is actually right before the Nakamoto Institute website, as it is now, was up. But actually, historically, Conrad Graf, who I mentioned earlier, had written some articles prior to this, so sometime in 2013, about this concept of hyper monetization, which was sort of like the opposite of hyperinflation, which in many ways is a hyper demonetization, because no one wants to hold on to a money anymore because it's failed. And hyper monetization would be, the process of an economy like moving into this new money at a very rapid rate, because prices start developing, and if you're in a bad economic crisis, like people need to be able to restore this. In fact, during say like the Weimar collapse, of their currency, there were many currencies that filled the void. I'm sure many listeners may have seen pictures before of wheelbarrows full of dollar bills, not dollar bills, but paper notes,
like Venezuelan bolivars, for instance.
Yes, but also specifically in the Weimar Republic. In any case, so the opposite of this, and applied specifically to Bitcoin, the hyper monetization of Bitcoin, we would call hyper Bitcoinization. And the article was basically explaining, what are some ways that we can think of how this would look like if it happened. And basically some of the main points, it differentiates it from hyperinflation. And the reason is a very important one, which is that when you're moving to a new currency that's superior, so we would consider Bitcoin a superior money basically on all fronts to the US dollar. If you're moving, especially if the dollar is failing, it's not doing great when you look at a long-term trend, but today it is what it is, and we all use it. But even more so, if it was failing, the move to Bitcoin represents the ability to do much better economic calculation. So the move from a inferior money to a superior one, first of all, it may very well be a very fast process. And also, it wouldn't so much disrupt the economy so much as actually accelerate the economy, because once you have a superior money, you can start making better decisions about how to divide labor, how to plan out, economic projects and entrepreneurial projects and stuff that can actually make, the economy grow, as opposed to thinking of a lot of people think that if Bitcoin took over, it would, a lot of hell would break loose because there'd be a lot of, chaos because like new money. But it's actually like the reason people are moving to a new money in the first place is because it offers them a better economic prospects. So hyper-Bitcoinization it's a very positive process. But another important thing I think to think about is that it's an interesting process because it happens at the margins. So like every individual to some degree decides, okay, well maybe I'll invest 1% or 10% of my wealth into Bitcoin. And every time this happens, even if it's just a very minor, minuscule amount, it does increase the liquidity and value proposition of Bitcoin by, creating a larger network effect. In fact, I'd argue that even someone, if they don't invest in Bitcoin, but suddenly Bitcoin is on their mind as a thing that exists, even that increases, at some unmeasurable degree, like an increase in Bitcoin's capabilities. Because if everyone was moving to Bitcoin and you at least knew you exist, like even someone like Paul Krugman is going to have to give in immediately at some point. I mean, just imagining a giant order book in the collective conscience where even just the thought of Bitcoin, there's an old joke of I think it's usually told with like Winston Churchill talking with some woman and at some dinner or something, and she said, "My dear, would you have sex with me for £1 million?" And the woman's like, "Oh, sure, Winston, whatever." It's like, "Okay, well, would you have sex with me for £5?" It's like, "Oh, Winston, what kind of woman do you think I am?" And Winston says, "Well, we've already determined what kind of woman we are. We're just negotiating a price." and likewise, here, I would say someone even like Paul Krugman has a price once he knows about Bitcoin. Even if he doesn't like it, like if it can mean, some level of economic benefit for him, he will capitulate.
Right. There's a price that all of a sudden he's going to change.
Exactly. So this process, what this is all getting to is this process of hyper-Bitcoinization, a process that I do believe is happening today, and I can explain why. And perhaps Trace was explaining if the topic came up.
Before you go on to that, because this may be covered in this, I have a question from Twitter about this for you. So let me ask this, because you might want to cover this while you're doing that, and it might be one and the same. Victor Iram wants me to ask you about your prior statement that Bitcoinization, hyper-Bitcoinization is happening with 99% probability, and wants to know, do you still stand by that claim?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The joke there is that, like, I say that, Pierre is the ideologue because he believes Bitcoin is going to take over with a 100% certainty. And I joke that I'm a moderate because maybe 99%, who knows what will happen.
Okay. I didn't know where that was coming from there.
Right. But yeah, no, I mean, I do believe that it's more on the inevitable side because of the absolutely incredible hard money properties of Bitcoin. I think when you pit monies together against one another on a macroeconomic scale, these fundamentals matter pretty much more than anything, especially when you can't resort to simple attacks on Bitcoin. Like you can't get rid of Bitcoin. It's kind of always going to be there. The idea of it truly going away is kind of unfathomable at this point. And so given that, those hard money properties will always be there as a specter haunting the global economy. And so, it's always going to be able to compete. You can't get away with legal tender laws, putting it completely out of business. That being said, for instance, one of the 1% is if out of, some, shall we say, some wouldn't say this is a miracle, some might say it's a miracle, but some miracle, for lack of a better word, the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve was able to muster the political will to power to do something to compete with Bitcoin's hard money properties. It could be the case that they use Bitcoin's competition as a means to force themselves into hardening the U.S. dollar, in which case United States and everyone who has gone through the process of dollarization, which is a real term, you can look it up on Wikipedia, for all of the countries that peg their currency to the dollar, they call that process dollarization, because they're effectively a dollar-based economy, just with their own sort of local currency being the proxy for that. But in any case, everyone who's tied to the dollar, if the dollar somehow managed to become harder, because it is a fiat currency, they can choose to have a sound economy if they want. They just don't benefit from it as much in the high time preference way that they want to. If that was the case, then I would say that the economy would be much better off regardless. I'd prefer Bitcoin, but first and foremost, I want a sound money because I want economic prosperity. So, we could imagine a very far-fetched situation where the US dollar is able to compete with Bitcoin, but it requires extreme coordination and will among the class that is controlling the US dollar, which I think is a bit fanciful. But with that, we'll say 99.99% or whatever.
Good enough. Hey, I had a message. I know you're not a financial advisor, but I'm just wanting to hear your thoughts on this. I had a message the other day from Luke, who's a listener to the show, and his message was, the basics of it. I've been a hodler since I purchased my first Bitcoin in January. So he bought it at a pretty high price. Mm-hmm. The show's content and liveliness bring to the space keeps the excitement going for me. What do you say to someone like Luke, who's been hodling from the high rather than your average hodler who's been hodling from the low? They've been hodling, They got in a low and they stayed when it went back down, but they're still up.
Right.
Yeah, where he went in at the high, the opposite, and he's still hodling, even though maybe he's lost 75% of his investment.
Yes, which is it's what we call baptism by fire.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not looking for financial advice.
Yes, and of course, for those listening, I am. Do not take this as financial advice. Blah blah blah.
When I got this message from him on Twitter, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes me really think.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a very tough situation. I mean, even longtime hodlers saw their net worth grow very much and then fall very much. And if people have read, Nassim Taleb, they know that losing a bit of money when you have a lot of money, like, you feel much worse losing $1 million when you have $10 million, let's say, than you feel good making $1 million. Right. Like that's sort of weird quirk of the human mind. So like that's the thing. And like I would say that basically any Bitcoiner has gone through that at some point. As far as financial advice, that's something to talk about a financial advisor, given someone's specific financial needs and whether or not they have, if they have pertinent, financial stuff to attend to at the moment, they should definitely be figuring that out way before they even think about Bitcoin. Because if Bitcoin takes over, even if you don't have, like, buying Bitcoins is a way to profit off the belief that Bitcoin will take over. But if Bitcoin does take over or grow, exponentially and all that, the world is better off as a whole, even if you don't have Bitcoins. Even the very last person to get their hands on Bitcoins benefits from that move because of that fact that we said that hyper Bitcoinization comes with, it's a superior currency that allows for better economic growth and prosperity for everyone involved. So that's one thing. Other things to think about, from let's imagine that he's not actually hurting. It's just sort of like he had some extra money and threw it at it, and now it's like,
I'm not saying he put a lot of money in there. I know nothing about his situation. I'm just saying he bought some. He might have bought $100 worth, for all I know.
Exactly. So like I want to use that for the sake here, just to eschew some of the financial pitfalls or whatever. So this was just throwaway money to throw at something, and he chose Bitcoin, and it was high, and now it's low. It's important to think carefully about, why is it that you are into Bitcoin in the first place? And I would recommend everyone go, read about the sort of hows and whys of Bitcoin, whether it's reading the Nakamoto Institute or the Bitcoin Standard or whatever, to understand the importance of sound money and how Bitcoin plays a role in that, and the importance of, uncensorable money, all of these things, all of these reasons that we love Bitcoin. Really get a deep understanding of it, so that you can start to be thinking more long term on this. Bitcoin is obviously extremely volatile. It's a crazy drama playing out in real time, and in my opinion, very important to be focused on the very long term. So I tweeted the other day that high time preference people buy Bitcoins for themselves. Low time preference people buy Bitcoins for their grandchildren's grandchildren. And you have to be thinking well in advance, because this is a huge project. This is not a get rich quick scheme. This is despite the fact that many people are interested in Bitcoin to some degree, because it might make them more wealthy. But sort of fundamentally, as a network, it's about creating a new monetary standard that restores sound money and all of these other important properties. So with that in mind, once you've settled on a more long-term vision of Bitcoin, suddenly it makes it much easier to deal with these lows for a number of reasons. One of which is that, the person I said I got interested, or sorry, I didn't get interested, but I learned about Bitcoin in 2011. There are people who bought Bitcoin at $30 and it crashed to under $1. So those people would have felt the same way.
Right.
There are people who bought at $200 in early 2013, and then it crashed to $80, and they'd feel the same way. And there are the people in late 2013 who bought at $1,000 and it crashed, or $1,400 or $1,200 rather, and then it went all the way down to, I think it may have gone down to, like $100, and they'd feel the same way. So all of these in the grand scheme of Bitcoin, it seems like every all-time high has at some point been a good time to buy, if that makes sense. Like, if you have a long enough time horizon and you think, you do hold the belief that Bitcoin will continue to grow, then any particular all-time high is not an issue.
Well, that kind of goes into my last question, was what advice would you give a new person coming into the world of Bitcoin? But that was great advice to basically do your research, was one of the things you just said.
Yeah. First off, do your research. The other thing to do is instead of trying to time the market, which is essentially impossible, something I would never recommend, try determining what is an acceptable amount of dollars you are willing to spend on a daily or weekly basis, and just buy on a daily or weekly basis. And sometimes you'll get an incredible deal. Sometimes you'll get a less ideal deal, but it will kind of average off, and you'll be more integrated into Bitcoin, because every day you're just kind of like you're just easing your way into a Bitcoin world rather than putting yourself in a position where you're going to be more susceptible to emotion. Because that's really one of the big problems here is like if you dump all the money in, at $17,000 or whatever, and then it goes down, well, it's gonna hurt a lot. But if you had, been buying weekly since 2015 at the low, you probably bought a little bit at 17,000, but not everything. And it's like, okay. And like,
so it's averaging.
Yeah. And based on the price now, I mean, this is, by the way, going back to an earlier thing. Why do I think hyper Bitcoinization is already happening? Right now, we're considered to be in a really bad bear market, and we're at a price that was unfathomable about 2 years ago. So, so with that in mind, we're like, this thing is growing exponentially. It's absolutely incredible, but you want to avoid putting yourself in a position where you're panic buying or panic selling, because this thing, the market is smarter than you and it will wreck you. And I'm sure there's day traders out there who kind of know what they're doing, and God bless their gambling souls. But well, like I said, like you want to keep from being emotional, because you don't want to be wrecked by the market. You want to be integrating yourself into Bitcoin.
Right.
And for people like us who have been kind of in it for a long time, we've been through a lot of bear markets, stuff like that. A lot of people, we relish the butthurt going on during the bear market. We love seeing people get so upset, especially the non-Bitcoiners trying to like gloat about it falling. And the reason is, for us, this is all part of the process. We've internalized that these things happen, like.
Well, as Trey said last week, it's a chance to pick up more Satoshis at a good price.
Yeah, it's a fire sale. And what's funny to think about that is it's a fire sale at a price that was, like I said, unfathomable, which is also showing a ratchet effect in the mind of the population at large. It used to, like, every time there's a bear market, there's a new, like, this is one of the great things about when we do hit bottom, whatever that means, whenever that happens, all that people keep talking about it. I don't even know what the price is right now. But when that bottom is established, whatever that may be, so let's say it's even as low as $1,500, that is a ratchet effect in the minds of everyone around the world who knows anything about Bitcoin and its price, where it's like, oh, I mean, of course it could still always go to zero, but there's a new low in which people think, oh, well, like, it'll go down to 1,500 or whatever. And it'll be seen, like, that will be internalized as the bottom, and it'll continue to go. Like, so, like, it used to be $1, then it was $10, then it was 80, then it was, et cetera. And it makes Bitcoin look better and better every time that it's hitting these so-called lows at much higher prices.
Right.
So if you can internalize this low time preference, long time horizon mindset, you start to recognize these patterns and how Bitcoin's actually doing great. It's all fine. And for me, it's also exciting because you get to focus on actually, what are the cool things happening in Bitcoin, regardless of the price. So what are the cool development projects going on? There's so much amazing things, so many amazing things going on in Bitcoin right now as far as development goes. And when you're not so focused on the price, you can spend more time focusing on these things, which I think are much more fulfilling anyway than staring at charts all day. And if anything, sort of increase the sort of baseline fundamentals for Bitcoin just by continually showing what Bitcoin is capable of.
Okay. Hey, next week we have Chris Merkel on here with the Exodus wallet. Are you familiar with the Exodus wallet?
I am not. I guess I'll have to listen to find out.
Yeah, Chris has been on the show before. He was going to be speaking at BitBlock Boom this summer, but he had to go to Russia for something for Exodus. But Yeah, it's a pretty easy to use wallet for people. I like it as my wallet's just so easy to use. But I wanted to let people know about that. And before we go, though, where can people follow you, Michael, and keep up to date with you or what you're doing or stuff like that?
The best place is probably Twitter. So if they go to twitter.com/Bitstein, Bitstein. And then also check out the Nakamoto Institute. The Satoshi Nakamoto Institute is at nakamotoinstitute.org. And also check out the Noted Bitcoin podcast at noted.org.
Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I enjoyed it completely. You answered quite a few of my personal questions in great detail. And that's one of the great things about doing this show is I can bring on people like you and find out things I want to know. And hopefully, while I'm educating myself.
That's exactly why we do the Noted podcast.
Yeah. So hopefully while I'm educating myself, other people get educated. So it's kind of like one of those win-win deals for everybody. But I appreciate it so much, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. A big thank you to all the cousins out there that are supporting the show by donating, subscribing, and leaving great reviews on iTunes. All of those things help the show more than you can possibly realize. If you want to show your support by donating cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, or by joining the Patreon page, just go to CryptoCousins.com/donate. You can subscribe almost anywhere podcasts are available by going to CryptoCousins.com/subscribe. I want you to get involved with the podcast, so call me with your comments or questions at 747-777-9471 or email me at TheCryptoCousins@gmail.com, and I will try to use your comments on future episodes. If you're really interested in keeping up with current news from the world of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, make sure and check out the 4-Minute Crypto Show that I produce every weekday. That's right, every weekday, 5 days a week. You can find it at 4minutecrypto.com, and it is the place to get your daily dose of crypto news in 4 minutes or less. And one last thing, please take a look at my new website, Crypto Crybaby. This website is for the true Bitcoin and crypto fan and sells Bitcoin and crypto gear like t-shirts, caps, and much, much more. Take a look at CryptoCrybaby.com today. Thanks again for joining me on today's show, and I'll see you next week. Love you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Crypto Cousins podcast. Please share the show with your friends. They can subscribe by going to CryptoCousins.com/subscribe. And if you want to know more about Gary, just go to GaryLeland.com. Make sure and join Gary and all the Crypto Cousins every week for a new episode of the Crypto Cousins podcast. The Crypto Cousins podcast and the information included in the podcast are not intended as investment advice. Investing in any cryptocurrency is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Always seek professional advice before investing in any cryptocurrency. Please understand, you are using any and all information from the Crypto Cousins at your own risk.